ready? Just went to get my earphones. That I've written throughout the years, and I'm not gonna talk much. It's more about the energy and the feeling, and whatever this speaks to you. Some of them I've lived through. They're not exactly factual because my memory is not the best, but some elements are biographical, some are magical, mystical. And sit back and enjoy. If you feel like contributing, you can contribute €10 for the whole reading. If not, that's okay too. I appreciate it. And sit back and enjoy and don't try to think too much. This is my soul speaking. First one's entitled Story of a Little Elf. He was a goddamn elf, and he was actually a pretty good one. He spent his life trying to be many things: holy, unholy, hidden, infamous, and a bunch of other things. It was all a fun story he created for himself, partly from a need to be loved, but mostly from pure boredom. Never leave an elf bored for too long. Well, that's practically impossible, except if you put him somewhere he's not meant to be. He loved trees and dogs and fairies and all kinds of magical creatures, and food and sex and beauty. He would probably spend most of his life stuck in this or that bush, or being lulled by this or that walking beauty. But he also loved poetry and beauty. He could not stand injustice, and he will not have any of it in his presence. And his presence was a wide thing. You could feel it as you walked in, like an elephant in a china shop. He would break all the china before even opening his mouth. He was not a diplomat, nor a Zen master, though he loved to sit with the queen and the magician on the magic holy hill where his family came from. There was something magic about those hills, though there was so much pain and so much death there, he could not stuck around for too long, lest he became a cosmic cleaning service. And he also wanted to do other things in life. He was still in search of himself, and he was not in a hurry of finding himself, whatever that means. He was a wandering wanderer, and as long as he's got tea, coffee, some food, a fireplace, and a kind word, he would tell you stories of magic and mystery that he himself would not believe, lest he live them through. Invite him in. It might not be such a bad idea. Hope you like this. Feel free to comment, share, or just show your expression of how this works for you. So this is the next one I written a long time ago. The deal with Ireland. With Ireland, it is as simple as this. You take her as she is, with all her pains and troubles, with all her aches, lumps, bumps, pimples. Her beauty lies not in a straight line perfection enforced by the mind, but in the curve of the landscape, in the soft sound of the smiling voice of the girl who passes by as she smiles. It opens you up. In that moment, you feel like you've met a goddess, and you have. You are blessed by the rain that shines its every drop on your skin. You are blessed by the rays of sunshine that come up and touch your soul. You are blessed by the sound of silence and the music of the spheres. If you are silent enough, you still might hear them. The landscape is still ancient. The stones still speak the truth. The fairy forts still hustle and bustle in the depths of the mystery. Be silent, stand still, and the world will come to you. Just a little bit silent after every story so you can really take it in and see how it feels. And this next one is a pretty personal one, and it speaks for itself, and the title is On Why I Can't and Won't Hate the Nazis Anymore. It's not political. Enjoy. Yes, I oppose them, and I will keep doing so until my dying breath at all costs. No, I do not in any way, shape, or form condone their actions or ideology. That is off the table. but I understand them, at least in parts, the place they're coming from. I remember years ago when I was in my apartment clinically depressed beyond self-loathing, self-appreciation, and hatred. One day I would be running around my apartment with a knife shouting at walls. The other day I would crawl in my bed not being able to cry. Shouting was actually progress. Most of the time I would just sit in this half gray, half dead, barely alive state, in between the bardos, so to speak. I read the whole Wikipedia site, all the mental illness definitions, wondering which one I have, and gloating over it like a gluttonous, insatiable, self-hating poor excuse for a human being. It was bad, really bad. But I'm not writing this to gain compassion or admiration for anyone. I'm writing this because I remember one day, as I went through all the conspiracy theories, feeding my mind crazy amounts of sensational information, made me feel important and gave my life purpose. And somewhere between the reptilians and the documentary and meth in America, or maybe it was the day before, I just slipped, and for a moment I thought I'd be willing to join ISIS just to feel alive. I knew it was madness, and I knew I would never do it, and I wouldn't be able to do, thank God. But I simply didn't care. It would be horrible. I would be doing horrible things which I despise, and then I would die in self-hatred knowing I achieved nothing. But it would feel better than the state I was in at that time. It lasted for a few minutes. That thought may not even have been mine. That was an empath, unaware of my boundaries, or maybe it was, I don't know really. And then I realized the horror of that thought and went back to my normal depressed self. Luckily, I had a decade of critical thinking behind me, a family that loved me, and a mentor that was watching over me, and a silent magician who would have coffee with me and told me every day I'm not crazy. And as much as all the amazing masters, I had to let go and do my own healing. They still stood behind me and gave me a mission and a purpose that made sense. Not everyone has these support networks, and I believe everyone should. And in that dark night of the soul, I have sworn, should I ever get out of it, and at the time, I was willing to live up my days in depression if that was needed just to give a fuck to the dark beast. I will find and make sure as many people as possible get as good support I was given, and gave me strength to go on. And I think I have, to the best of my ability, stood true to that promise. The dark night gave rise to a new dawn, not only as poetry, but as reality. I pray every dark night you face gives birth to a new dawn. Amen. With blessings. Bless everyone who's going through something like that right now, or has, or will. God forbid. And I'm just going to give you a little taste of the stories that are unfinished, but just to give you a start. If there's interest to finish them, you can get them from me. This one's titled Germania. He went to Germania. What could he do? He was broken in the middle of another war with those he loved, and that didn't work. He pretended he knows how to do stuff, and they just badly needed people since nobody wanted to do slave labor unless they needed to. But the money was good, or so it seemed. He had no idea what was waiting for him. He kept telling himself it'll be an adventure. And a week later, soaking wet in the woods, carrying really heavy aluminium poles with a Nazi supervisor not allowing him to take a break, and shouting at everyone for the whole 14-hour workday. It was a game he couldn't win, but he wanted to keep playing as long as he could. It was an adventure. He wrote to his beloved that day, I'm somewhere in between the prison camp and a shamanic initiation. But hey, it was cool in a freaky, crazy, mad kind of way. That was only the beginning. He was going to meet so many interesting people, some of them not completely crazy. The kind special forces tall guy from the French Legion who would not speak of details of his missions. The rather okay, humble Muslim guy who loved God and was even if quite sharp. The Serbian bloke who was honorable and kind. And many, much more. To be continued. This next one is entitled Three Wise Men. And I wrote this a few years ago in Ireland during lockdown. And today I think it's Epiphany or Three Wise Men or something like that. I'm not sure which day it is. There's many different holy days. But the three wise kings, Caspar, Melchior, and Balthazar. Wise men, really wise. Go and check it out. These three men from the story are not the three wise men, but they maybe thought they were. Three wise men. They lived in a magical house, barely big enough for all of their three egos. But they stayed out of each other's way most of the time, and it worked. Well, mostly. One of them was a refugee, or so he at times thought himself to be. It was actually kinda home, but that's another story. His country has been taken over by Lord Voldemort since the plague thing has gotten worse, and he was escaping the dense darkness that took over his home, the magical land of Narnia. He felt a lot of guilt and shame for leaving. He left at home two things that meant the most to him, the dog and his long lost love, that one day, every time he got close to, got away. He was sick of trying, and he also had enough of playing the victim, and yet to go to Tirnanog to let that go. The other guy was the master of the house. He was a fishy character that seemed quirky and weird with a big smile on his face, which annoyed the Germanic character of the first guy because he wanted to be happy too and was practically a walking mystic. But he was currently learning how to be a warrior on the first lines of the gift of the fight against the plague. He was doing a good job, and more importantly, for the first bloke, mostly kept away and gave him space to chill and heal. And the first guy needed it badly. The third guy showed up from a broken home, one of the many homes that were broken in the Northern Kingdom. He was brave enough to allow himself to be kicked out from his mother's bosom in order to grow up. They were all learning about what it means to be a man, and they had to do it quickly. The plague was just a warning. Much greater things were about to be unveiled soon. Hope you're liking it so far. If you are, feel free to comment or share your opinions. Interesting reading all the things. Okay, this one's written this a long, long, long time ago. Yeah, just listen. A Divine Comedy. He met her at a concert on the Magic Island in the middle of Danube. He had been walking around checking out how much it would cost him to get another beer or drug, or how long it would take for the whole thing to be over so he can go home about how bad go home and gloat about how bad the night was and how lonely he is and how lonely the world is to him. His girlfriend at the time just told him she's breaking up with him, for whatever reason excuse that was. It was one of the last concerts. He couldn't remember the band. Despite his fear and trepidation, he danced closer to her and put his hand around her. To his bewilderment, she didn't resist. She had the biblical name, and by God and all the gods, heavens opened. He couldn't remember the music. He was melted in bliss. After the concert, they spoke, and he tried to make her promise she would meet him the next day. She did. She lived in a small apartment in the vestiges of Budapest, and she had a doggy and the big poster of Divine Comedy, a band he would never forget and would always be grateful for it. They made love, and love was back in town. He had to leave the next day and promised to return, find a job, and start a family, one of his many grand ideas he tried so often in the future. He left full of love and hopes. He did come back next year full of hope, plans, and gusto. But what happened then is another story to be continued. This next story, let's see which one to read next. Alright, this one's pretty cool. A grand epic story of everyday life. For him, everything was epic and grand and larger than life. He could not even take a walk without entering, getting stuck, and escaping 16 different worlds because he even got to live his coffee in the morning, before he even got to have his coffee in the morning. He had to be reminded by Zen Master that none of them were really real. Not really. Although they were not fake either, strictly speaking. It was just his imagination. Except that the world is nothing else but the imagination of God, and we are God in human form. But that's a story for another time. He did not see people as people, he saw people as magical beings of light who are yet unaware of the true potential. And he saw himself sometimes as a king, sometimes a magician, sometimes as a failure of a boy trying to grow up. None of that was true. He was just nature experimenting with herself for the sheer joy of it. But he wasn't aware of it most of the time. So drama casually ensued. His little magic town was full of hidden alchemists, ancient beings, and holy mountains, real and imagined. On this particular day, he was to explore the hills in the distance, and he was going to have so much fun. As usual, he had no idea what he was getting himself into. It's just the beginning of the story. If you want to hear the whole thing, I might do some more readings in the future in a more private space. This one's pretty old. Name of the Rose. He met her at a cheap hostel, the only one he could get into, for he had just a few coins left. He took the last available room with 10 people in it. It was the same place he found the first time he came to Ireland. At that time he was running away from hell and mayhem in his own head, most of it of his own making. It mostly came about as a consequence of another love story gone bad. He had a tradition of those. But part of it was something much more mysterious which he kept for himself, since he knew the looks he would get if he ever told anyone, or so he thought. So there he was, after one of these magic circles where anything can happen, and often does. He walked in the room, half naked. It was dark and everyone was sleeping, but he also did it on purpose, like young Aries often do. He noticed her reading a book. He can't remember which one it was. He said hi, or something like that. She looked at him and smiled. Electricity in the air was palpable, more like nuclear. He knew a bit of energy. He knew a bit about energy, but it was different. It was like universes colliding, and yet she felt so gentle. He would learn more about it in the coming years. But this time it was unique. He sat next to her, already feeling guilty. He had someone at home. He did not want to be disloyal. He was big on loyalty. They just stared into each other's eyes, and eventually he lay down with her. They both just lay there. It was one of the most beautiful things he has felt in ages. And he could not get his head around it. Nor did he try much, really. In the morning he said he was sorry. He wasn't. And it cannot come to anything else. He has someone and he wants to be honest and it wouldn't be right. She agreed. She said she was sorry too. She wasn't. They had breakfast, they said their thank yous and went their separate ways. I had no idea that when universes collide and they both choose to allow it, a bond is made and the story needs to be played out. This is where the story began to be continued. God bless her and all of them. And this one's the last one for today. It's the Poet's Tale, Magic and the Gathering. He always believed in magic, even before he had a name for it, like all children do, before they were told not to. But that's a whole other story. The truth is, he often wondered if he's mad, or if there's something wrong with him, like a diagnosis or a missioning gene, or too much of little chemicals in his brain. Not because he really believed it, but because it would be easier for him. He would have an explanation, and there was potential for a quick fix, a simple solution for the complexities of life. But he knew that was bullshit. He didn't need three different psychologists tell him there's nothing really wrong with him. Though on some days, like the one time he was crashing a window or hitting a wall, it did help. Because the line between a mystic and a madman is paper thin. As for magic, one has to take full responsibility for everything in your life and beyond that in his reality before he can even begin. And that was something he was just not ready to do just yet, until he did. And this is where the story really begins. Okay, everyone, I hope you enjoy this. It's a little taster. Feel free to comment, share with everyone, and do your own magic. Because what the fuck is life about if not magic? You can check my website. You can come to my circles. You can come to my poetry readings. You can get my book. You can do whatever. But thanks for watching. Have a beautiful day. Bye bye.